For many long-stay foreign national residents of Hong Kong, going on to become a permanent resident after 7 years of continuous living here is very much the end game in mind. So, let's discuss how to go about achieving such a right of abode here. So, whilst this program is really designed to talk about, the practical dynamics of immigration in a business and an employment context, actually, you'll discover that a number of foreign nationals that are here see permanent residency as the end game. The Audit Commission report was very interesting because it showed that out of 100 foreign nationals who arrive on day one, by the time 7 years have unfolded, only 2 of those foreign nationals will go on to become permanent residents. So we've only got a 2% conversion rate from temporary residence to permanent residency. But for those people who do want to become permanent residents, this is absolutely critical, because this application, once they get approved, is the moment where all the conditions associated with living in Hong Kong fall away from the hands of the immigration department. Once you can get permanent residency, you become a de facto citizen of Hong Kong, albeit you can't get a passport. And so because it's the end game, it's worthwhile just spending some time going through the criteria for approval for the right of abode, which is permanent residency, after you've lived in Hong Kong for a period of not less than 7 years as a foreign national. There are several other heads of being able to acquire permanent residency in Hong Kong, but I'm not going to discuss those. I'm going to discuss it only in the context of long-stay foreign nationals. Okay, so the right of abode itself isn't reflected in the visa label that goes in a passport. It's reflected in the issue of a Hong Kong permanent identity card. And you claim the right of abode by making an application to the immigration department to verify your eligibility for a permanent identity card. And as I say, for our purposes, this means you're a non-Chinese citizen, you've been resident in Hong Kong continuously for not less than 7 years. And so you have to show, and you have to demonstrate your continuous ordinary residence for those 7 years, and you need to show to the immigration department that you don't have any outstanding taxation liabilities, or that there's no security objection. So encapsulated, what this sort of means is that the test for approval is, have you been continuously and ordinarily resident in Hong Kong for a period of not less than 7 years, where any absences from Hong Kong in that time have been of a merely temporary nature, as evidenced by what you leave behind in Hong Kong to return back to at the end of each temporary stay abroad. As I say, there must be no outstanding taxation liabilities, there must be no security objection, and you must have had back-to-back residence visas in Hong Kong throughout all of that time. If for some reason you find yourself without a residence visa in those 7 years, as long as the status that you have is obviously temporary, and usually it's a visitor status, and that during the time that you held that visitor status you were principally in Hong Kong, and there's evidence in your life that speaks to you earnestly seeking to bring about residence visa status again, coming off the back of visitor status, such in the quickest possible time, such that you can get back to formal residency in Hong Kong. That's where you have a state of administrative flux as you move from one immigration status to another immigration status during the 7 years. It might well be that as a result of that changeover in immigration status, you find yourself needing to be in Hong Kong, but the only way you can remain in Hong Kong for one reason or another is as a temporary visitor. Normally, time spent as a temporary visitor with those conditions in play during those 7 years, as long as it's no longer than 3 months, normally that does not serve to break your continuity of ordinary residence. Similarly, if you find yourself moving, as very often people do, from, let's say, an employment visa sponsored by a third-party employer through to a business investment visa as an entrepreneur, and let's say you apply for the investment visa 2 or 3 weeks before your current limit of stay is due to expire, and you know it's going to take the immigration department 2 months to complete their determinations in relation to your entrepreneur visa application, as the 2 weeks limit of stay that you've got at the point of submitting your application ends, and there's another 6 or 7 weeks to go before the immigration department approve you, the question is begged as to what happens in that interim period. Will you lose your continuity of ordinary residence because you're in what I've couched as the twilight zone? That's where you go, where your existing limit of stay is expired, but the immigration department have got an active application in the system in relation to your continuing residence. They still need more time to grant you the approval that you need, but you've got a few weeks in the middle where you don't have any valid limit of stay manifested in your passport. Query, does that break your continuity of ordinary residence for the purposes of the right of abode? The answer is no. If you're in the twilight zone, as I've couched it, as well as if you're in a state of administrative flux, that does not break your continuity of ordinary residence. Key point to sort of raise here is, in a practical sense, what happens if you're working for a Hong Kong employer and then they send you to Singapore for 2 years? Will the fact that you've been temporarily deployed to Singapore for those 2 years, will that break your continuity of ordinary residence? Well, so long as in those instances the fact of your transfer to another country in pursuit of or at the behest of your employer's commercial interests over there, and your Hong Kong employment subsists at all times, and it's a temporary secondment, and you're expected to return to Hong Kong at the end of that period of time, even in those circumstances, that will not break your continuity of ordinary residence, so long as it's at the behest and direction of your employer, and you maintain your Hong Kong employment visa, and you maintain your Hong Kong employment contract throughout all of that time. And indeed, at the end of the exercise, if you haven't been away for a full 7 years, then you return back to Hong Kong and you continue and pick up your life through to the final 7 years, and then you make your application for the right of abode. Temporary secondment in those circumstances will not break your continuity of ordinary residence, whether it's for a long or a short duration. And that's more often the most practical challenge that you might have to face when advising clients as to their eligibility for the right of abode is, this time they spent away, in those circumstances, did it serve to break the continuity of ordinary residence, yes or no? If it didn't serve to break the continuity of ordinary residence, then they could go on and get approved. And very often, a lot of the advice that we give relates to employees who are about to be sent off somewhere or about to receive an opportunity to perhaps work for a subsidiary company, but the way that the employer in Hong Kong is anticipating the structure, they're just going to terminate the Hong Kong employment and then pick up a completely new employment in the other jurisdiction. And sometimes employees are not willing to go down that path because they prefer the potential to become a permanent resident as being more valuable than actually going off and doing a 2-year side stint with their existing employer that would, on the conditions of being offered, would serve to break the continuity of ordinary residence. So this is practically where you see this when giving advice for these types of applications for foreigners who are thinking about the broad vista of the 7 years that they've got here and how they can plan matters. And I'd say 50% of the cases after we've given advice, they then go back and have a negotiation with their employer, and their employer is then prepared to make adjustments to the plan that would allow them to maintain the continuity of ordinary residence while still completing their missions overseas, usually for 1 or 2 years or whatever it is.